Hi everybody. Well, I've just had a very interesting couple of evenings. I managed to get hold of all the tracks for the new Revolver box set that's coming out on October 28th, and I've spent a couple of evenings with it. I've been writing notes so that I can do a full song by song review of the whole box set. So, of course, this video is going to contain lots of spoilers for the new Revolver box set. Do not say I didn't warn you. If you don't want to hear spoilers for the box set, then please come back to this video when you are aware of what the contents of the box set, once you've had a chance to listen to it, because I'm going to be talking all about it here. I haven't actually got the physical box sets yet. I'm hoping to get those a few days before the release, so sometime maybe 2 or 3 days before release I will be doing unboxings. I'll be doing further reviews of the vinyl set, because the review I'm doing here is of the digital file, so comparing it to the CD version. So please join me for that if you wish to do, by hitting that subscribe button. But I've got 8 full pages of notes about the Revolver box set, which I'm going to go through now. I'm going to let you know what I thought of it on my first couple of listens through, and I've been comparing it to previous versions as well, and really sort of trying to drill down on the differences between this new Giles Martin remix and the original, let's say the 1987 CDs and the 2009 CDs, and where applicable the one remixes from 2015 as well. So I'm going to get straight into the main remix of the album first of all. I'm also going to cover all the bonus tracks, all the session tracks later on in here. So the main album remix obviously starts off with Taxman. You've quite probably heard this one already. This was the first song to be released on streaming services and on YouTube, so there's a good chance you've probably heard this one, but I thought that this is a much more balanced mix than the original stereo mixes that we've had. The bass is louder, but it seems to dip out in places, so it's not at a constant volume, but overall it's much better balanced to me than the previous stereo versions. Paul's lead guitar comes in the centre of the soundstage rather than being sort of stuck out on the right. I wouldn't say that the lead guitar has any more or less impact here, but it just feels that it's better placed being in the middle. Overall, a really nice remix. I have nothing derogatory to say about the Taxman remix at all. And then Eleanor Rigby, of course, really nice balance on the strings. Again, compared to the, if you go to the 87 or 2009 versions, this does feel more balanced again. You've got the low cellos on the right and the Bernard Herrmann Psycho style strings there on the left, with McCartney clear as a bell down the centre. And it's hard to believe, listening to this, with how clear he is, that this recording predates England winning the World Cup. It's crazy to think that this is just like 56 years ago now. You wouldn't think it from listening to it. Very nice balanced mix instrumentally, and it's hardly any different to the Yellow Submarine song track version, the version that's on the album up there from 1999, but the vocals are much more forward and clear in the mix. It's certainly not as loud as the 2015 One Plus remix, and so it doesn't have the kind of potential harshness that mix has. And the volumes are more on a level with the Yellow Submarine song tracks and the 87 stereo versions. So again, Eleanor Rigby, I think it's a really nice remix. I don't think there's anything to get upset about here, but with all of these projects, there's always something for some Beatles fans to get upset about. But 2 songs in, I'm very happy. I'm Only Sleeping. It's got a real nice depth to the soundstage, with John sort of sounding as though he's a couple of feet behind my speakers. So that works really well when he sings the line, I'm miles away, because he literally sounds like he's miles away compared to the instrumentation. The bass, again, it's more noticeable here, but it feels like it's compressed a bit, with the attack set high, if you're familiar with how compression works, and the attack that sort of really sort of cuts the sound off quickly when it starts to decay. It feels like that's set on high. There's a lot of space in this new mix. Everything's sort of really got its own place in that soundstage. And I don't think that this version has got the same impact as the original, but if you're looking for clarity, it's definitely there with that wideness of the soundstage. Love You Too, again, it's wide, really, but it's panned nicely, so it's not all one thing on one side and everything else on the other side like it has been before. I noticed some unexpected timbre beats, and I wasn't sure whether it was that they were always there but they've been difficult to hear in the mix, or whether it's things that have actually been brought in. I suspect it's beats. I suspect it's things that have already been there, but they've been brought out more, so you can hear some beats that you're maybe not expecting to hear. It's a really nice balance again. I could argue that it lacks the impact of the original mono, certainly, but it's a real nice mix. If you're looking for the definitive version of this song, I would still go with the mono version. Here, There and Everywhere. The bass, it's weird because simultaneously the bass is more noticeable but also feels quite restrained. But I did notice some really nice bass flourishes that Paul does that I'd not noticed before, so they've been teased out in the mix. The lead and the backing vocals seem to be coming from the left and the right. I think it might be maybe some ADT that's been applied. So of course, if you've got the vocal coming from the centre in a two-speaker setup, of course it's coming equally from two speakers. But this feels like it's coming from the left and the right. So there's probably just the slightest of time shifts there. It's a really nice impression of being a range of voices spread out in front of you, almost like a sort of a mini four-man choir. It's a subtle remix is this, but a very nice one. Yellow Submarine then, and what I noticed straight away is that Giles has gone with the original mono mix rather than the original stereo mix in terms of him recreating the original guitar note, and I just wanted to just show you what I mean by that. So in the original stereo mix, the guitar comes in sort of on the second beat, if you like, so it's in the town like that, whereas on the original mono mix it's in the town, the G and the D, and he's replicated that mono mix here, so in the town. I'll stop that now. But that was interesting to see that he'd referred to the mono as his sort of reference there for the intro to Yellow Submarine. Now this, of course, is one way you're thinking, oh, this could be really interesting with all the sound effects and everything. So how did they sound? I thought that the sound effects were a little more prominent through the verses than it has been in previous versions. Certainly, sort of it's like a kind of a sort of a crowd chattering noise, if you like, and that feels raised in the mix. The kind of sound effect solo in the middle it didn't quite sort of pop, I think, like the original version did. So overall, I thought this was quite a restrained mix. I think whereas if you'd imagine, let's say it was like the Love album where Giles could really go to town on a remix, this feels like he's really kind of held back. Nice, but felt a little bit restrained to me. She Said, She Said. Now, this is so far the most radical remix on the album, I think, without a doubt. There's a lot of space in this, whereas before, She Said, She Said was like, I think everything sort of came in together, and it's quite a crowded mix, and I don't mean that in a bad way in terms of the original, whereas this, everything feels a little bit more spaced out and nothing's getting in the way of anything. And it instantly reminded me of, for those of you that have got the RAM 2021 half-speed remaster, it's very similar to that in that everything's very sort of compartmentalized in its own place in the soundstage, and it's quite jarring to listen to. It's not as loud a mix as I'd been led to believe from some reviews that I'd heard. Some reviews sort of made it as though, oh, this sort of blows your ears off when it comes in, and I think that was the case in the Sgt. Pepper remix with Mr. Kite, but this, I don't think it's anywhere near that level of, whoa, it sort of takes you by surprise, the volume. It certainly didn't for me anyway. It's very interesting. George's backing vocals at the end are more prominent, and it's much more obviously George on those parts of the backing vocals that are his. Another thing I noticed here is you have the intro, you've got the guitar intro, and then Ringo's cymbal crash comes in, and it's kind of buried here compared to the 1987 and the 2009 CDs, but the clarity of the guitar and the vocals is really nice here. And it's really interesting looking at the. I've seen a digital version of the booklet that we're going to be getting in the vinyl and the CD sets, and it clears up once and for all. It's Paul on bass on She Said, She Said. For decades we thought that Paul didn't appear on this song at all. Well, he's not singing on it, but it is Paul McCartney on bass, and that's kind of emphatically stated here now. But I would say it's probably the main song on the album that I'm struggling with at the moment as a remix. Maybe it will come. It's certainly clean. But is it a bit too clean? I'm not sure. I certainly need more listens, I think. Good Day Sunshine next. So, again, it feels like each element of the mix has been given a bit more room to breathe. And it's cleaner than Paul's Grandfather. But I like it here. If you're wanting more clarity from a Revolver stereo mix, you are absolutely going to get it in here. There's loads of it. The hand claps are more noticeable throughout, and I think because this is it's kind of a sparser song than She Said, She Said. The room that it's given to breathe in the mix helps it, I think, and it's a really nice remix. And Your Bird Can Sing, probably so far compared to everything else on the album, this feels a lot more faithful to the original stereo mix. It's a really nice balance. I would say it improves the stereo imaging, and it doesn't really lose anything from the original mix. John's voice is brought a little bit more forward compared to the 1987 and the 2009 mixes. So I would say this is really taking the original mix and just giving it a little bit of a polish and just shining it up a little bit. But there's nothing radical on And Your Bird Can Sing, but a good remix. For No One. Now, interesting. Right from the very start, I like this. I like this remix. It's quite different though. The main difference being there's a clavichord, which it's a bit like a harpsichord, but it's gives a kind of a piano vibe that's on here. Straight away, it sounds like it's in a concert hall. It feels big, and it took me a little time to work out maybe why that is. And it's because, again, have they applied a little bit of double tracking to it to make it so obviously coming out of the two speakers? You listen to the original mix and it's just coming out of one speaker, whereas here it's very noticeably coming out of both, so it's much bigger. But you might think that's a worry on such a kind of an intimate song as For No One, but I really liked this actually. It's a really lovely mix. Paul sounds as though he's in the room. He really does. He's up front and he's so clear. The vibe of the song is different, definitely, because of this clavichord sort of double tracking that they've got going on in both speakers. But I really enjoyed this as an alternative way to hear the song. I don't know that it would replace the original for me, but I certainly enjoyed this remix of For No One. Then Dr. Robert, and a little bit like I said for And Your Bird Can Sing, I thought this is a really faithful remix, but they've just given it a nice little polish. The guitar that runs through the verses, that's got it's got like a little bit more bit more choppiness and a bit more prominent in the mix, which is no bad thing at all. I think it really suits it. The bass, I noticed on the bass now, because you can hear it more clearly. You can hear you can kind of hear the timbre, if you like, of the bass, and it sounds like the bass from Paul's Band on the Run album. If you think of Mrs. Vanderbilt, for example, it sounded like that kind of bass. Really nice, but much more noticeable than on previous versions. And I don't mean they've turned it up. I don't mean it's sort of a loud boomy bass or anything like that. I just mean that it's kind of it's more noticeable and it's got its own place in the mix. But Dr. Robert, really nice mix that they've just kind of added a bit of a polish to the original. I want to tell you the main guitar riff, interesting here. It starts off in the right speaker, which is different to the previous mixes, and immediately it sounds like it's got new strings. It does sound a lot cleaner, but then it goes from the right speaker and the guitar moves across during the intro into the left. And that reminded me very much of Her Majesty at the end of Abbey Road. You know how that kind of Paul sort of starts over here and then moves over here during the song. Well, George's guitar intro does the same during the intro, which is quite interesting. The piano and the bass, just the way that it sounds here, the way that it's been sort of cleaned up, it sounded to me like Old Brown Shoe, and I've never thought that before, but I've got a bit of Old Brown Shoe vibe from it. So it's good remixes, I want to tell you. I enjoyed that. Got to Get You Into My Life, which has always been a favourite song of mine, always really loved it. This mix, it's got the excitement and the confidence of the original mix. Again, it's fairly faithful to the original. There's nothing radical here, but it's got a better stereo balance. The big bold brass that you have that comes in at the start, instead of it being stuck on the right, again it fills the whole soundstage really nicely. The brass is a little bit more trebly and not quite as fat, if that word sort of makes sense, as the 2009 CD, but really nice. But it certainly sounds, the brass sounds a lot better than the 1987 CD. When I compared it to that sounds dull by comparison to this. And then we get to Tomorrow Never Knows at the end, and this is the one where you're thinking, my God, what, a bit like with Yellow Submarine, what could they have done on a remix here? How different could it be? Well, instantly from the beginning, you've got a difference to the original mixes. Ringo's drums, it's interesting. It sounds like he's drumming in a cave, and I don't mean that in a bad way, because you need it to be effects on Tomorrow Never Knows, don't you? But it's sort of, Ringo being in a cave, it makes the whole song feel like it's in a tunnel. Sort of, Ringo's at the back of this tunnel, and everything's a bit sort of more, everything else is a bit more forward, rather than it being a big wide soundstage. It's all kind of down the middle. Very interesting effect there. But Ringo's tom slams have got much more impact than on the 2009. If you compare when he's hitting those toms to 2009, so much more sort of vibrant here, without being overbearingly loud at all. When John comes back in later on with that kind of megaphone effect where they used a Leslie speaker, he's a bit higher in the mix here than he was previously, and feels a bit closer up to the mic as well. So Tomorrow Never Knows is, again, it's not quite as radical a remix as it could have been, but I really liked this sort of vibe that Ringo's drums gave off at the start, that makes it sort of all feel in a tunnel down the middle. I don't know whether you'll get that, whether you'll sort of hear what I am hearing when you get to hear it for yourself. I'd be interested to know what you think. But I really enjoyed that. So overall, with the main remix, I think there's certain highlights for me. Like, I think Dr. Robert was a highlight, just because of how much they kind of cleaned it up without losing anything from the original. I really liked what they did with For No One, with the sort of the big clavichord. Eleanor Rigby and Taxman sound superb. There's a few other things that I think are going to take a while for me to get used to, but I will certainly give it plenty of plays to try and do that. She Said being the most obvious one. So this remix doesn't feel quite how I imagined it to. I imagined it to be quite a heavy-handed remix and quite a loud remix digitally, like the Sgt. Pepper one was, and it wasn't. It was a lot kind of cleaner and a bit more restrained than I was expecting. So I certainly enjoyed it, and I'm certainly going to go back and give it plenty of plays. I can certainly see it replacing, for me, the original stereo mix. I think I will probably be more likely to play this than the stereo mix. The original mono mix, I think, slams more, and if I'm going to crank it up loud, I think the mono mix will still have the edge and still have more impact and be better than this. But I think there's a lot to love here with this main stereo remix, and certainly enjoying it so far. Okay, moving on to the discs of sessions now. So, Tomorrow Never Knows Take 1. If you've got Anthology 2, you will have known this for potentially up to 26 years now, because it's the same version. It's got a little bit of Lennon chatter at the end that you don't get on Anthology 2. It's crazy listening to it, though, to think that this is just about the first thing that they did during those Revolver sessions, and we're talking pretty much not far off exactly 3 years after they recorded the bulk of the Please Please Me album. The progression is just astonishing, it really is. In terms of the sound quality here, this feels certainly remastered compared to the Anthology 2 version. It's a bit more vibrant, it's got a bit more mid-range to it, and I would say this is definitely a better sound quality than what you've got on Anthology 2. Then there's Tomorrow Never Knows Mono Mix 11. So this is the mix that went out on a few early pressings of Revolver, and it's largely the same, but it's got some extra piano at the end that goes on for longer. That's the main difference that you're going to hear. But it was interesting listening to this for me just a few minutes after hearing the main remix on the main album, and I was amazed at how big and clear this sounds, despite it being a 1966 mono mix. It's not immediately obvious as being mono because it's just such a big mix, but it's got the noticeably different and extended piano ending. But it's great to have a clean copy of this, and it really does sound great. So I think you'll enjoy this one. Then Got to Get You Into My Life, Take 5. You've got quite a lot of interesting chatter between the Beatles and George Martin at the start about how to arrange the song, and there's some kind of friendly disagreement with them about how they want to do it. And then it goes into the version that we know from Anthology 2. But again, this has been remastered and I think has got a much better sound quality to it than what Anthology 2 has got. If you've not heard it, if you've not got Anthology 2, it's a radically different arrangement of Got to Get You Into My Life. It's much more restrained and much more of a sort of a quieter song. It doesn't have the confidence and the balls that it went on to have. We've then got to Get You Into My Life, second version as it's called. And my notes here say, holy mother, wow, what an impact start this had. I absolutely loved this right from the moment it started. This is the version that today, as I record this on the 21st of October, this version has gone on streaming today, so you'll be able to hear this version straight away. Amazing. I absolutely loved this. It's instead of the brass riff, you've got a fuzz guitar doing that. So they had that riff in mind very early on, long before the brass was brought in to do it. You've got rhythm guitar in the background that's doing di 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 di, and it sounds to me very much like Getting Better. The rhythm guitar that's in that was interesting to hear. And the main riff, it almost sounds very similar to Paperback Writer riff as well in places. I was really not expecting what I heard here, and I was utterly thrilled by it. One of my absolute highlights of this whole set. So watch out for Got to Get You Into My Life, second version. Superb. We've then got to Get You Into My Life, second version, take 8. This is kind of the missing link between the previous track that we just talked about and the final version. It sort of sits in between the two. The brass and the sax is now here, but it's still got a slightly heavier guitar feel to it. This is an instrumental version, so it'll be a really great one to sing along with at home, I think. But it's a good version. I enjoyed this one. We've then got Love You Too, take 1. Ooh, this is fun. This is George's acoustic demo. Really nice Paul harmonies on it as well. If you're familiar with George's All Things Must Pass box set from last year and the demos that are in there, this feels like it could have been from the All Things Must Pass sessions. It sounds like that George. It doesn't sound like really young Beatle George. It sounds almost like later era George, but really nice. I mean, it does make me wonder, when he was at this point with just him and an acoustic guitar and Paul on backing, did he know where this was going to end up? Was that his plan all along? I don't know the answer to that, but really interesting to hear this version at last. We've then got Love You Too, Unnumbered Rehearsal, which focuses on the Indian backing arrangement of the sitar and the tambura. There's no percussion on this. We've got George saying "ow" at the end for his fingers. 2 years before Ringo got blisters on his fingers during Helter Skelter. So that must be from him playing the sitar. So that was fun to hear at the end. And then Love You Too, take 7. It's definitely taking shape now. The backing, it feels almost exactly the same as the final version, although it goes off into some other directions towards the end of it. George and Paul here are still working on the final vocals. with high harmonies from Paul. George is clearly progressing very nicely as a sitar player on this song. So it's really been really good to hear the progression of Love You Too there. We've then got Paperback Writer takes 1 and 2. We've got a short take 1 that shows them kind of almost there with it with the riff, but Ringo's drumming feels a little bit regimented at this point. He's got the rock, but he's not quite got the roll yet. He's still learning the song and getting a feel for it. But then they pretty quickly go into take 2, and take 2 is it. That's the backing of Paperback Writer. They nailed it on the second version. They did add quite a few overdubs later on, but in terms of the drums, the bass, the main guitar riff, that's it. 2 takes done. Absolutely superb. So it's great to hear that here. We've then got Rain. Astonishing, this one is. Take 5, actual speed. So you may well know that the version of Rain that you've always known is actually slowed down from what was recorded. So this is what they actually recorded at the actual speed. It is an incredible tempo. It feels like surely it's been speeded up. But no, this is what they played. And the drums and the bass, they go a massive lick. And just full credit to Ringo and Paul for keeping up the rhythm that they do throughout the song, because the pace just takes your breath away. Paul's amazing bass riff really shines through here, and you can sort of really tell the high bass that he's using even more here, because of course it's not slowed down, so it's in a slightly higher key as well. There's a bit of an extended outro here until a breakdown of the take, but really fun to listen to. We've then got that take 5 but slowed down, and coming after what you just heard, it almost feels like it's like being slowed down at a comedy speed, a bit like changing from 45 to 33 on your record player if you accidentally play a 45 at 33 speed, but then you realise no, this is the speed we've always heard it at, but it sounds so slow when you've just come off the back of the actual speed version. There's no backing vocals here yet on this version, so and there's kind of sparser arrangement of what we've heard, but again it's good to hear that progression of it. We've got Dr. Robert take 7, sounds very clean. It's very similar to the final version, but it's not quite finished yet. There's an interesting bass effect that Paul does, where it's like a where it's a bit like I thought of it as a machine gun bass effect, which I certainly don't remember hearing in the final version. And Your Bird Can Sing first version take 2. This is the arrangement that we know from Anthology, the laughing version, but this is a regular sung version, so there's no laughing on this. It's great to hear what they originally intended the song to be like. We then do follow it up with the giggling version that you know from Anthology 2. Fantastic. I've always loved this, one of the absolute highlights of the whole Anthology project for me. But it's just got a little bit of studio chatter at the start, just to give us a little bit extra than what we got on Anthology. And Your Bird Can Sing second version, take 5. So it's now the version as it was released on Revolver. This is a more restrained and slow version of the final arrangement, and they're still clearly working it out between themselves. There's some interesting vocal sort of ahs throughout that were eventually dropped, so it was interesting to hear them still playing about with it, and some really nice fills from Ringo. At this point it's nowhere near the level of the final version, but you can really sort of feel how it will grow from here. We've then got Taxman, take 11. This is the version that we know from Anthology 2. So, you know, the anybody got a bin of money, anybody got a bin of money, etc. But again, it's nicely remastered here. Sounds nicer, sounds fuller. It's got more clout than the 1996 Anthology mastering. I'm Only Sleeping rehearsal fragment, instrumental version with kind of glockenspiel backing. Again, it's on Anthology 2. You will hopefully know this one already. We've then got I'm Only Sleeping take 2. The song's progressing nicely. This take then descends into Lennon silliness, and George doing some sort of classical guitar style noodling over the top, which George Martin comes in and tells George is too loud. So it's quite interesting to hear them just kind of playing about in the studio while they're still working out I'm Only Sleeping. Then there's a really interesting take 5 of I'm Only Sleeping. Quite a bit faster than we've been used to hearing. This reminded me immediately of the kind of sound that the choral made a career of 35 years later. There's the favourite song of mine by the Coral, Bill Mackay. This sounds really similar to that. It's an instrumental version, is this, but it's fascinatingly different. We've then got the mono mix 1 of I'm Only Sleeping. So it's the final version, but an alternate mix of it. And I noticed quite a few more backwards guitar parts at various points during this. We then move on to Eleanor Rigby. This one's called Speech Before Take 2. So you hear the musicians, the string musicians, discussing how they're going to approach the song. You've got George Martin asking Paul if he wants vibrato or not. And then he asks the musicians to play their parts sort of a few seconds with vibrato, without vibrato, and then a few seconds with. George says, which do you prefer? Paul doesn't mind. I don't think he can tell the difference, to be honest. So it's interesting hearing the sort of evolution of the song in terms of how they were making decisions and how the other musicians were getting involved in that. Eleanor Rigby Take 2. This is a strings and cello early take. The strings in particular are playing quite a looser rhythm, especially at the start. So it's not quite attack, attack, duh, 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 duh. It's more duh, 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 duh. They've not quite nailed it yet, and there's still some timing issues that they've got between them. So it's very much the classical musicians working out their part. It felt to me almost as like I was listening to a bit of Eleanor's Dream from Give My Regards to Broad Street. It had that kind of a feel to it. The cello's got real impact here though and sounds great, but not quite ready yet. For No One, Take 10 backing track. You can really hear the studio. As soon as it starts, you can hear Abbey Road. It's a little bit like, at the end of A Day in the Life, when they really crank the microphone gain up to get that sustain from the piano, and you can hear the studio. It's like that right from the start. So you can hear the air as Paul and Ringo are discussing the song. The clavichord, that harpsichord style instrument, again, it's got that concert hall feel that I mentioned in the new stereo mix. This is an instrumental version and shows how the song was going in development, but it's got a really big sort of, you feel as though you're in Studio 2 of Abbey Road here. You don't feel like you're in a small room at all. And then one of the most talked about elements of this whole box set, Yellow Submarine, songwriting, working tape, take 1. Oof, wow. This kind of blows apart everything we've always known about Yellow Submarine, really. The sort of story from Paul that's always been about how he dreamt it, in that sort of state where you're just about to go to sleep and you're sort of half awake, half asleep. And I've no doubt that didn't happen. I've no doubt that did happen, but you get the feeling now that was probably Paul thinking about the chorus, the We All Live in a Yellow Submarine part of it, because the verse here is very clearly John. Very fragile acoustic demo. I almost got hints here of My Mummy's Dead from Plastic Ono Band in this demo. But you've got John sort of sounding really fragile and singing, in the town where I was born, no one cared, no one cared. And it's really, really interesting to listen to. So it certainly sounds like John came with that verse. Paul had a chorus. Whether or not it was about submarines when he dreamt it, I don't know. But it sounds like the two of them probably then joined those two parts together and made it into a song about submarines, which we hear in the next take, which is take 2. Paul's now here. The lyrics have been changed to almost what we know as Yellow Submarine. It's now a song about submarines for sure. But it's still quite a downbeat folky song here and being sung by John. So it's still sort of very different. At first I thought, is this a bit more Rubber Soul than Revolver? Then I kind of changed my mind on that a little bit. If it is anything like anything on Rubber Soul, I could imagine it being if you sort of slowed down I'm Looking Through You a little bit, it might be sort of along those lines. Still very interesting though to hear it being radically different to what we've ever heard before. We've then got a version called Highlighted Sound Effects. This version is on Anthology 2 as well, and it's the one that features Ringo's spoken word intro. And the sound effects are higher in the mix here and exaggerated. But if you've got Anthology 2, you will know this one. We then move on to I Want to Tell You, Speech and Take 4. It's introduced by Geoff Emerick as the mythical Laxton's Superb, which has been well documented in various books over the decade, has been an original title for this song, and here it's introduced as such. It's an instrumental version, most of the elements are in place, and it's not too far from the final version, but this take breaks down fairly quickly. We've then got Here, There and Everywhere, take 6. Quite a loose version. Paul's not yet tightened up the vocals so that they scan quite as efficiently as they do in the final version. There's no backing vocals on this. It's just a really close mic'd Paul, no reverb, and again it feels like he's in the room. So, it sounds really nice. She Said, John's demo. I think this has been floating around on the internet for quite a few years, so I think probably quite a lot of you will have had a chance to hear this already. But again, it's another lo-fi home demo, a bit like Yellow Submarine was. And it was interesting to hear John using the technique that in Get Back we heard him telling George when George was writing something. And John says, write the, just use the first word that comes into your head. You can worry about the proper words later on. When he suggests George uses the word cauliflower, he's doing the same thing here. He's singing, it's making me feel like my trousers are torn. Obviously never going to be the final version, but John doesn't worry about that at the moment. He's just getting the vibe of the song and how it's going to scan. But it's quite a downbeat version. We've then got She Said, take 15, backing track rehearsal. It's an instrumental version, a little loose but not too far from the final version, and this box set, as I mentioned earlier, got definitive proof now that Paul's playing bass here on this, after we thought for decades that he wasn't. That's the sessions. There's a lot to go through there. Very interesting sessions disc. I really enjoyed these. I think I will go back and listen to these quite often, and one of my main takeaways from the sessions disc was that it reminded me quite a lot of how the sessions for Sgt. Pepper sounded. It almost sounds like this is the Sgt. Pepper version of the Beatles in the studio when you listen to some of this stuff. So I thought that was really interesting. And I'm now going to go on to talking about the mono version of the album that's included here. So there was a lot of excited talk when it was announced that there was going to be the mono version in the box set. Especially with the vinyl, when it was, well, will it be all analogue or won't it? And it turns out that it is going to be. And this is described as a flat transfer from the original 1966 mono master. So I was very interested to hear how would this differ from the version that's in specifically the 2009 Beatles in Mono CD box set. Because remember here, this is digital files that I'm listening to, lossless, so they are up to the standard of the CDs. But how would they compare to the 2009 Beatles in Mono CDs? And in a lot of cases, I was seriously struggling to hear any difference at all. Now, if you're somebody who missed out on the 2009 Beatles in Mono box set or the 2014 vinyl box set, then you're in luck here because there's very little difference. I'll go on to talk in a moment about what differences I could tell, but essentially you've pretty much got exactly in this new box set what you would have missed out on in those. So what differences could I hear? Well, they were very subtle, the ones that I did. The vocal intro on For No One had a little bit more impact in this new version compared to the 2009. And I felt it was an improvement here compared to 2009. In Dr. Robert, the guitars in the intro were fuller and more exciting in the 2009 version. They felt a little bit flatter here. And in She Said, the vocals have got slightly more treble here in the new box set and have got slightly less warmth than in the 2009 set. Yellow Submarine vocals, they've got a little bit more mid-range in the 2009 than they have here. So apart from the differences that I heard in For No One, where I would say that's an improvement here in the new box set, it seems to back up the common conception that the 2009 and 2014 had some EQ applied to the files, where this has been described as a flat transfer. If you want something that is even more authentic, potentially, to the 1966 mono, this is probably it, to be honest. So I think there'll be a lot of people really enjoying the mono set because it really has got some clout, and I very much enjoyed it. The last songs here in the box set, and taking up a disc to themselves, which is a very controversial decision, some of you really hate the fact, is the Revolver EP. And on the first side we've got new 2022 stereo remixes of Paperback Writer and Rain, and on the second side we've got the original mono master, that's the 1966 mono master of Paperback Writer and Rain. So Paperback Writer on the 2022 stereo remix. You have never heard the vocal intro sound as clear as it sounds here. Sounds really, really good. And thankfully the reverb overload that was on the 2015 one remix has gone. So it's much drier here. When Paul's Epiphone Casino guitar kicks in at the start, I don't think it's got quite as much slam as the 2009 stereo, or certainly not the mono remasters of the album. But it's a very nice stereo remix, and as far as stereo versions of Paperback Writer go, I think this has got a lot of merit to it. Slight lack of slam in the opening guitar, but a much nicer sort of stereo balance to it. If we compare that to Paperback Writer Mono Master that's on the other side, this mix has always been stunning. It's one of the absolute highlights of the Beatles in mono. Absolutely tremendous. So it was going to have some doing to kind of live up to it, to that. And what you can tell immediately here is that this is a remastered version of that immense mono mix. So it's got, overall, it's got a slightly punchier sound. I mean, the original punched harder than Mike Tyson. This has just got everything just a little bit cleaner and a little bit remastered, without going overboard like a one remix might have done. So I think there's an awful lot of merit to this 2020, to this mono mix that we've got here. From the original mono master. Sounds really, really good, and it's giving the original 66 mono single version a run for its money. We then move on to Rain, so the 2022 stereo mix, and this is one where I'm really, really on the fence with this one. Basically suck it and see whether you prefer this to other versions. So I compared it to the original stereo mix, which was in the 2009 box. It was first released in stereo on the Hey Jude album. And between that, the original stereo mix, and the 2015 One Plus remix, all three have got a very different sound to Ringo's initial drum fill on the intro. It just sounds like he's using a different drum kit on each. But really, I don't think you can say one's wrong and one's right. The purists will say, well, the original's right. I'm sure you will. But I think there's merit to all of them here. The guitar here has been switched to the right channel compared to previous mixes. Not quite sure why, but I thought that was interesting to note. This is a great sounding remix, no doubt about it. But I think all of them have been pretty good so far. So I would encourage you to make your own mind up on that one. I'm going to sit on the fence very much on that. The Rain original mono master, so I'm comparing this to the 2009 mono CD box here. There's quite a big difference here. So in 2009, Ringo's snare really sounded like it was under a duvet. It was quite dull and lifeless. Here, it's been freed from that, and it sounds like a snare would sound if you were in the room with a drummer hitting a snare. And if you've been in a room with close to a drummer hitting a snare, you know about it. So it really brings the drums to life, I think, here. I've always loved the original mono mix, but it was interesting to note that when I heard this new one, it's got a lot more life to it, which is really weird when you think that the original mix has been magnificent for 56 years. But all of a sudden I listen to this one and think, this has got a lot more to it. So I really enjoyed the Rain mono master on the 4-track Revolver EP. So it's been really interesting over the last couple of nights listening to all of this and really kind of taking it in. I was umming and ahhing whether to do that before I got the box sets, but what the heck, I decided to go for it. So I will also be talking at length about the vinyl version once that comes out, and I'll compare that to other vinyl versions that we've had. So I will also, like I say, be bringing you the unboxings of the CD box set and the vinyl box set, which I'm hoping to be able to do around about Tuesday next week. So that will be about 3 days before release, I hope. Fingers crossed, unless nothing goes wrong with that. So that's been a bit of a mammoth but whistle-stop tour through all the songs in the new box set. I hope you've enjoyed that. Let me know your thoughts down in the comments. I appreciate that if you're watching this video in the first few days, a lot of you won't have heard it yet, but hopefully a lot of you will come to this once you have heard it to see maybe how it compares to your own thoughts. So I would love to hear them down in the comments. But thank you very much for watching. Please stick with the channel for all the further Revolver excitement that's coming, and I'm going to log off now and say goodbye. Thank you very much.